Hey guys, today let's look at roles for Pokemon Unite. So putting it very simply, there are a few factors in game. One of those factors is position, so you're going to be top, mid, bottom or jungle. One of the four options just describes to your teammates where on the map you're going to be located. Another factor which is very important is your team composition. So you have to make sure your roles are balanced. So for instance, say you want to be a tank, you can't all be tanks. 5 tanks on a team, you're just going to lose. You need to have a balance of the different roles. So then that brings forward what are roles. Roles just explain what you are supposed to be doing in game, and it makes sure you very quickly can tell your teammates what your intention is in the game. So for example, you could say you are top AD assassin. So they would know your location and they would know what you're intending to do in that game. So I am going to go over the roles from Dota 2, League of Legends, and Heroes of the Storm. So if you already are familiar with the roles, skip ahead in the video and then we will apply those roles to Pokemon Unite for what is useful. Dota has 5 roles. These are: the hard carry is given the most last hits and farm throughout the game, as heroes in this position are typically those that are extremely weak early on and need farm in order to be effective in the mid to late game. They are expected to do the most damage and contribute in team fights late game, and will carry teams with their consistent damage output, hence the name. You have the offlaner. The amount of farm offlane heroes get just hugely depends on how the first 2 positions get their farm, and when the carry and mid pick heroes generally go around the map sucking up as much farm as possible, the offlaner normally gets relegated to being almost a third support for the team. The next position is solo mid. Heroes in this role will be second only to the hard carry in terms of farm priority, thanks to the way their kits are usually designed. These heroes typically don't require as much farm as the hard carry. So in Dota 2, there are 2 support roles. Firstly, there's the utility support. A utility support hero is a hero that has a utility-based moveset, so they are giving you CC, or they're giving your team like speed buffs or other kind of armor boosting buffs rather than kind of strict healing. Where you also have the hard support, which of the team is the lowest priority for getting XP. They are heroes that are typically extremely fragile, so they are usually the first to die in ganks or team fights, but it's a critical role for the team because they are the ones that are going to give you sustain or healing and keep the rest of the team alive. In League of Legends, there are a lot of roles, so let's speed through them. Firstly, you have AD Assassin. AD Assassins look to take advantage of squishy champions with low mobility. Traditionally, you see magic damage coming from the mid lane, so these picks are often compensated with magic damage elsewhere in the composition. AD Assassins look to take advantage of squishy champions with low mobility in the mid lane to try to find kills early in roam. Hyperscale ADCs are weak in the early game, but they are unrivaled in the late games. Hyperscaling ADCs get disproportionately stronger as they get items. They have glaring weaknesses in the early game that are exploitable during the lane phase, notably a lack of range. However, if they make it to the late game and get proper peel, their damage output is unrivaled. Mid-game ADCs. These ADCs thrive off a 1-item power spike early in the game. They do well in lane, giving their early game nature. Their team will look to force fights whenever possible around objectives. Utility ADCs. The utility ADC role has weaknesses, but brings great tools to a team. These champions all have an initiation tool, very rare for an ADC, that makes them a great pick to cover for other roles. On the downside, they have limited mobility and can be easily targeted in teamfights and in lane, but by nature of being utility, they always bring something positive to teamfights for their teams. Melee carries are much rarer in bottom lane, but still are viable for patches at a time. They are picked almost entirely for their kill threat in bottom lane, as it can be difficult to play them from behind. These picks are stronger if a ranged ADC is picked in another role, so that the team does not lack in siege potential later in the game. AP carry. AP champions in bottom lane are uncommon, but made an appearance during Season 8. They are best paired with a heavy engaged support that can attempt to blow up one of the enemy bot laners. Playing AP the bottom lane allows more flexibility in loading up on AD damage in roles like mid and jungle. Split pushers exist in side lanes, attempting to capitalize on their dueling power to do one of two things. If left 1v1, they ideally are able to overpower any champion for a kill. If they draw more than one enemy, the rest of the split pushers team can force an objective. Split pushers rarely look to group up, only showing up if they can clean up kills after a fight has started. Tanks are generally sent top to survive the laning phase until team fights. They don't do the best in 1v1 situations, but because of their health and resistances, they can survive the longer lane better than squishy champs. Tanks can set up well for ganks because they are often loaded with crowd control and the top is a long lane. AP champions are taken top usually because of the team composition is AD heavy everywhere else. That is not to say that AP champions cannot thrive top, as they often have a very good poke damage. Most will attempt to use wave clear to survive the lane as a squishy champion and transition to team fights later in the game. Ranged lane bullies are picked to win their lane matchup. They often do not transition as well later in the game as the trade-off for their early game dominance. They are often used to counter melee matchups top lane to try to snowball a large early lead. Junglers, jungle split pusher. These champions have the same general play pattern as top lane split pushers. Instead of trying to survive a laning phase, they power farm their jungle early. Laners have to be careful early as split push junglers often do not have an early influence on the game. Tank junglers are weak in the early game, like tank top laners, and are vulnerable to invades early. However, they are often great at ganking and scale well as the game progresses, and they get more tank items. Playing a bruiser role in the jungle means often prioritizing health over resistances. Jungle bruisers function the same way as top lane bruisers. They want to build damage early to take advantage of their early gank strength. As the laning phase ends, they prioritize tanky items to survive in team fights. Their lower economy often forces them to prioritize health over resistance. Jungle AD, these AD heavy champions that can carry out of the jungle. They won't offer the tankiness of other junglers, but they are often strong early and do well in skirmishes. AD junglers are good for aggressive players and are typically at high health throughout their jungle cliff. Jungle AP, uncommon like top laners, AP junglers are also often picked because the team composition needs an extra kick of magic damage. AP junglers are very squishy as well and are often used to set up picks on the enemy. They thrive in small skirmishes and ganking. AP assassin. AP assassins, like AD assassins, also prey on the squishy champions mid lane, but are more reliant on their abilities and levels to ramp up. They take a bit longer to ramp up, but also tend to have safer ways to get out of fights later in the game. In addition to being weaker early, AP assassins also typically lack wave clear, often problematic when the team is behind. A control mage is the classic class of mid laners. They possess wave clear, hold up in the lane, and scale well throughout the game. Control mages are a great backline presence to output semi-consistent magic damage and control zones of the map for your team in fights. A burst mage. Burst mage champions focus on one target and spend all of their abilities to pick up the kill. Burst mages look to dump their damage in one spell rotation to zero out one or more champions. They differ from control mages in that they have less consistent damage. Burst mages pick their one opening in a fight and commit their entire burst. It also makes them potent laners when they hit level 6 and unlock their ult. Poke mages use their long range spells to try to poke out enemy champions from being able to fight. They typically have great wave clear and can contribute to fights when ahead or behind. They struggle against hard engage from enemies due to their limited mobility like control mages. Bruiser. Bruisers are a mix of tankiness and damage in the top lane. Often they are strong in the early laning phase and build damage early. As their impact falls off, they start to build tanky items to survive fights. Bruisers like to hit one item power spikes and battle it out in skirmishes. Top lane support. Support top laners are most often used to support a hyper carry of some kind. They are usually ranged and poke down melee top laners early. Supports are highly susceptible to early ganks, but transition well later if they have strong enough allies to buffer. Tank supports are most often used as a form of engage for the team. They generally struggle early in lane because they are melee, but have great kill pressure, especially with gank assistance. These champions have hooks that bring the enemy into the champion's team. While they often build tank, their focus is on picking off an enemy champion rather than initiating on a full-on team fight. Pick supports have great kill pressure in lane and have to be accounted for when they roam around the map. Clearing and establishing vision is key to playing pick supports. Heavy damage supports often have at least one form of crowd control so that they can lock down a potential kill. Heavy damage supports are AD carries that are thrown in the support role. They have great range to harass the enemy bot lane and a ton of damage for kill potential. Heavy damage supports often have at least one form of crowd control so that they can lock down a potential kill. Poke supports are champions that have great range poke to harass an enemy bot lane. They offer less burst potential than the heavy damage supports, but trade that off for more consistent damage and more crowd control. They are susceptible to early ganks because they must play aggressively in lane. These utility supports are largely picked for their game-changing ability. They don't offer many traits for support champion, but they have a special ability that is good enough to throw in low economy roles. Support mid laners are often chosen to augment a hyper carry pick on the team. By taking the gold from mid lane, they are able to provide stronger shields and heals and add an even stronger layer of protection to a teammate. They often lack the same damage as other mid laners but offer some wave clear. The enchanter role is what you would expect in a traditional support role in many games. Enchanters exist to heal, shield and buff up their teammates. They often do well in laning phase because they are ranged and add good sustain to their carries. Enchanters often struggle against hard engager focus despite their peeling abilities. They focus on building items that further buff their carries, like warrior. Heroes who are placed into the warrior role traditionally have high health totals, melee attacks, medium damage output, and some kind of crowd control. They're the big frontline characters designed to protect the squishy allies behind them by getting in the way and absorbing damage. Warriors typically fall into two archetypes, tanks and bruisers. It's important that you know the distinction because the talents you choose and playstyle you adopt will definitely vary for each. Support characters are all about keeping your team alive and as effective as possible. They normally have moderate health totals, low damage, and strong healing capabilities. Supports have to find ways to get timely heals, buffs, and debuffs into the battlefield to maximize their team's efficiency. These characters mostly belong to the healer archetype, but a couple are more about general utility than straight up heals. Assassins are all about killing things, as their name so clearly implies. They usually have low health pools, moderate crowd control, and very high damage. All assassins have the same goal, deleting enemies, but they do it in two different ways, sustain or burst damage. Each of those archetypes requires unique playstyles to maximize their potential. There is also a specialist role, which is used as an other of sorts to catch any heroes left out of the three primary roles. The most common element among specialists is the ability to push lanes and do substantial siege damage. Beyond that, they all do it in very different ways, have very unique kits, and rarely play the same. Also, there are a few heroes that don't really fit in any of the kind of official roles, so they could be loosely called hybrids, which kind of go between roles and have different options of which direction you could take them. Okay, so now that we've gone over all of the roles in the other MOBAs, I wanted to kind of apply those to Pokemon Unite. So with some MOBAs, they tend to have too few roles, and there are plenty of heroes that kind of fall between the gaps, whereas leaning towards League of Legends, I almost feel like they have too many roles and it's too specific. So I like to fall very nicely in the middle. So Pokemon Unite has already given its own roles, which are support, balanced attack, defense, and speed, but ultimately is down to the community to decide the final roles. They can tell us what they're calling the roles, but for us playing in game, ultimately the terms we use are the terms that will stick in tournaments and in general play. On the surface level, the roles they have chosen aren't the worst. I mean, they've chosen support, which is a natural term. We all understand what supports are. They've chosen attack and defense. Like attack, I'm guessing that's kind of more of your assassins and bruisers, where defense is going to be your tanks. Balanced maybe is your more kind of hybrid versatile roles, but then speed is one that really throws me. You know, what is speed? Are they saying high mobility heroes like assassins? Or for me, I'm not hugely on board with that term. I'm not hugely on board with attack or defense either. For me personally, going over all the roles from the different MOBAs and kind of applying them to what we've seen from Unite, the terms that I like a hard carry. The hard carry is the character that is going to need to get a lot of XP to really be great later in game, but if you let them do their thing, potentially in the jungle or as a laner, if they gain enough XP, then later in game they're just going to snowball and be unstoppable. Definitely you need a tank in the mix. Your tank is going to be great at sustain and just hold those team fights together, and generally be the one who is watching out what's happening in game and making sure that you're making the right moves. I like to lean towards two supports, like a utility support and a healer, but you don't necessarily need two. I would argue even someone like Talonflame is almost like a utility support with their control, and they can push the other team into a team fight, whereas someone like Clefable is probably going to be more into the healer side of support. I definitely think Warrior and Bruisers are necessary in your team makeup. I don't know if I would necessarily call them that. I like the term Warrior over Bruiser, but I would be happy with either of those. Finally, I feel Assassin is a good term. People generally understand what you mean when you say Assassin, as in, you know, very high mobility, generally burst damage, or can get you down very quickly, but tend to have kind of weaker health. You're not gonna expect them to sustain for too long during a team fight. Also, I think a key role is to have a versatile position or a hybrid position where the hero kind of goes between the other roles and is flexible, so during the game you can decide how the game is going, and to really say your tank just really isn't cutting it, that you can kind of fill that position, or say your hard carry just isn't getting the right XP, if you can get that XP elsewhere, and then you can fulfill that carry position. So I hope you have found this video helpful. I'd appreciate if you shared and gave me a like, and I'd love to see your opinions below on which roles you think are the most relevant for Unite and which ones we should move moving forward. Ultimately, the decision is up to us. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.